Thank you for
Take it
joining
away.
us. Thanks, Kay. Thanks for joining us for our final presentation here at the SUNY Online Summit 2026. And thank you for adjusting to our schedule change. I'm joined this afternoon by Peter Diplock and Rose Terrata Esposito, both from Stony Brook University, where they're going to talk about what I think is a really great governance system for their online programs at Stony Brook. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it right on over to Rose and Peter to tell us about their system that they have.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for this opportunity. Um, Maybe we'll just do sort of brief introductions. So I'm Peter Diplock, Vice Provost for Continuing Professional Online Education and the School of Professional Development at Stony Brook University. And I'll turn it over to Rose.
I'm Rose Terrata Esposito. I'm the Assistant Provost of Educational Transformation and the Director of the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching at Stony Brook.
And I should just mention by way of sort of entry point that the framework that we're going to talk about also stems to some extent from my experience at my previous institution, University of Connecticut, where I had responsibility for starting UConn Online back in 2012. But it also reflects a very broad, deliberative shared governance process here at Stony Brook University. So just by way of sort of introduction, I thought that was important. So I think we can all appreciate that shared governance is critically important, and perhaps nowhere is that more the case than online. If you happen to talk to one individual and ask them for their sense of an institution's online strategy, you may not get the same sort of shared understanding that you might with some other aspect of, say, undergraduate or graduate education. And so at Stony Brook University, we've got, depends on how you count it, but let's say, from 25 to 50 online or hybrid programs. The vast majority of those are graduate programs. And one of the drivers of recognizing the need for online governance was the fact that, and this stems in part, I suppose, because of the pandemic, but there were simply still a lot of questions around policies and procedures for online courses and programs. And so, do I need to do anything special to get an online program approved? Or what are the processes to get an online program approved? Aside from the SUNY level requirements, there were sort of local level conversations. Similarly related to policies. A good example of a policy area that we needed to have dialogue about for graduate online programs that get ranked by U.S. News and World Report. One of the categories that gets ranked is, the extent to which faculty rely on professional instructional designers to help develop the course, and or how much training do faculty receive who are teaching in online programs. And so that was just an example of one sort of policy discussion that we tried to that we knew we had a need to sort of address. So the other thing was to build sort of a sense of transparency. And so we recognized that we needed to create broad representative groups. And I say groups because we ended up creating two different sort of groups as part of the overall online governance. And we also recognized that we needed to invite people in that were both seasoned proponents of online education and also people that were novice and really didn't have a great deal of familiarity with online education. And so we looked for people across schools and colleges and programs and across administrative units and academic units. The other reason we felt we needed online governance was that the question always gets raised in terms of what kinds of resources do we need to have, what kinds of resources do we have to support student success for online learners. And then the question we had to unpack was, well, what do we mean by online learner? Are we talking about a traditional undergraduate student that might have 4 courses entirely in person and 1 online? Are we talking about the resources needed to support student success for graduate students who might be entirely online? And so it wasn't clear what resources we were talking about and or how to differentiate those. I think as many of you know too, there is a growing sort of accreditation dialogue going on about online education, and Middle States had requested a special meeting in our latest Middle States accreditation visit to focus exclusively online, and we recognized that we hadn't done perhaps as good a job institutionally as we could have articulating our online strategy and resources and other commitments. And then I think perhaps one of the biggest ones is yes, we have the Oscar rubric that we rely on, but in faculty conversations, there was a sentiment that there was somehow this need for greater quality assurance across our programs. So how do we really come to know that the programs that people are articulating that are high quality are in fact high quality? How do we come to understand that those programs have a set of standards that are as equally or perhaps even in some cases more rigorous than what we might otherwise have for non-online? And so there was a sense of, could we use governance to help reassure people about quality in online education? And again, I think for many of you, this probably is a familiar sort of trope, but when people use the word online, often you'll hear, as a precursor, you'll also often see like high quality before online, as if somehow it's a necessary precursor to the word online, because the default schema is it's not quality, or it's not as good a quality as in person. And so I think that's just something that comes with the territory. Next slide. Oh, sorry.
I'm just going to jump in for a second, because before Peter got here, I'll say that we didn't really have an online place where online fit specifically, right? It falls under him now, and it was very beneficial for us as a whole. We went through the SUNY Online institutional readiness process right before COVID. And then after COVID, we just went through it. We just went through it just this past academic year. So it was actually an output of our initial online institutional readiness prior to COVID, but because of COVID, it never really got up and running. And here in South, like right here in the teaching center, we get all these questions about policies and everything, and we don't have any control over that, right? Because we don't inform policy. We work with, we'll work as a support mechanism, but we don't actually have that control. So it was actually, the online institutional readiness program was something that we had to complete. And then Peter came in, and, his role in taking over the online, and then all of the information that we've collected since COVID kind of really brought it all together and made the online governance it was a no-brainer at that point, and something that was really necessary for our university, and something that we should have done a long time ago, but it actually worked out really well, because I think we had all the right players in place in order to implement it moving forward.
So let's just talk a little bit about the process in assembling these two groups. And so as we thought about this process, trying to determine which stakeholders and what interest those stakeholders might have was part of what drove our decision to, as you'll see in a minute, create both an online steering committee and an online program council with slightly different responsibilities. But in essence, what we did is we reached out to every school and college, and asked the deans for representation in terms of, their particular school or college. And I think, again, everybody can appreciate that each dean, by virtue of their role, has a different take on online education, or a different need in online education. In the School of Nursing, as an example, where graduate nursing is almost exclusively online, it's a very different ask when you're saying, and you get a different participant on the committee or in the committee space, as opposed to asking, let's say, the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, that is almost a university unto a university, very large, very diverse, more than 25 academic departments. And so the deans were instrumental in identifying people that they thought could be good boundary spanners between the committees and the kinds of conversations that were taking place in the schools and colleges. We also have, we call it POLT, the Provost Office Leadership Team Meeting, which is a combination of the vice provosts and senior associate provosts. And that was also a sounding board group, because that group really helped us identify what non-academic areas should also be represented on the committees. And so that was really helpful in trying to shape out the, let's call it the invite list. And then, of course, the provost. The provost had, Carl Lejwe, our provost, has a deep commitment to shared governance, as does our new president. And so the process about, how do we go about inviting people into this was something that he took seriously, and he provided a great deal of direction and support for. So we started out, after we'd identified sort of the, let's call them kindred spirits or suspects, we said, okay, so now what do we need to do? We need to send them a letter inviting them to join. We established the cadence for the committees, so we could, clearly say, here's the level of commitment that we're looking for you from. And in some cases, I'm sure that people, when they got the invitation letter, were like, why am I being asked to be on this committee? I don't have any responsibility for online education. We didn't go out of our way in those introductory letters to sort of spell out and cross the T's and dot the I's. It was more talking about the purpose of the committee. And that in that first meeting, we would sort of go through and help people understand what the shared purpose was and to contribute to the shared purpose in the agenda. And so we, we established that. We developed a charge for the committees, and we used previous sort of governance bodies as templates to help inform that. You can see the cadence here. The last two bullet points talk about the cadence of the Online Steering Committee and the Online Program Council. And again, each of these have slightly different, different responsibilities. And Rose, I don't know if you want to sort of share your thoughts about, I remember early when we were doing this, you had, those were some of the conversations about, it's almost like two overlapping Venn circles, or two overlapping circles in a Venn diagram, where there are clearly some things that are independent or separate for these committees, but there was also the question of, do we need one committee? Do we need two committees?
Yeah, we even talked about 3 committees for a little while.
I don't remember that one.
for special, for regulations, right? There's always these new regulations coming down the pipe, and we're like, do we need this ad hoc committee for people to just deal with that? It was a challenge, and we, trying to get everyone is involved in so many meetings, as I'm sure everyone knows here, that it's really hard to find. It was really hard to figure out how often we need it. And actually, we've changed this. This was the initial, and then we have changed it. Right now, we're meeting twice a semester for both groups until right at this point. But it was we're trying to keep them a little bit more as aligned, but as Peter said, we address, we have that Venn diagram, some of the content we address in both groups, and then there's content that we'll address in one or the other. And when we get to the makeup of each of the teams, it'll be a little bit more obvious why.
Yeah. So I'll just share a few thoughts about the sort of the broad framing structures of the groups. And so the Online Program Council, the membership in the Online Program Council really was designed to give every graduate program director that had responsibility for an online program a seat at the table. We'd heard enough, after I'd gotten here, and I'm sure, in my conversations with Rose, she'll recall these, but our graduate program directors had needs, and they really had a need to be surrounded by people that could understand the world in which they lived. And so there was a sense, the Online Program Council is a little bit more of an affinity group, if that makes sense. That is, the people that populate that group, it's not just graduate program directors, but predominantly graduate program directors. And the focus there tends to be on what's critical for you as a graduate program director. So what can we do the framing question is, what can we do as an institution to facilitate your success as a graduate program director? What can we do as an institution to facilitate the success of your faculty, teaching in your program, and what can we do as an institution to facilitate the success of your students in this program? And we sort of have those three questions over and over and over again. And they're program level. And so, in some cases, the question might be related to not enough people know about our program. I wish the institution did a better job marketing our programs. Or we're hearing from our students that, when they reach out at the university, that people just simply aren't aware that we have online programs. So a lot of it was awareness. And in other cases, it was related to issues of support for faculty. So that's the Online Program Council. The Online Steering Committee was designed more to pull people in that had, again, think about the word boundary spanner or what it might mean to you. For me, what it means is somebody's got a home, they got a day job, they're doing this thing as a vice president, or they're doing this thing as a director, and that's what they do day in, day out. It might be in IT, it might be in the office of the bursar, the registrar, might be in libraries. But we need them to sort of translate back some of the issues that we're talking about, and we need them to bring issues to the table, that things that are going on in their world that are going to have potentially an impact on online students or faculty. And so the steering committee was constituted from a broader group, a bit of a broader charge. It's also the group that really does engage with university-wide policies and practices related to online education. So these are often where conversations get shaped, where there's an inconsistency with something that we're doing that needs to be more mindful of the situatedness of an online student. So again, if we think about when conversations take place at our university and somebody uses the word graduate student, their default schema is generally not an online graduate student. It typically is a full-time 2-year thesis research master student, or it might be a PhD student. So part of the role of the Online Steering Committee is to tease out implicit assumptions that often get made in ways that, they're not intended to be harmful, but by virtue of not taking into account the unique needs and circumstance of online students, often we don't get it right. And so what areas are we not getting right? What do we need to do differently to get it right? And so the Online Steering Committee, again, had a bit of a broader focus. And the last thing I'll say is that both, what joins the two committees together, in my mind, sort of, so that what's the overlapping space between these two circles? If somebody were to ask a member of the Online Program Council or a member of the Online Steering Committee, what is Stony Brook University's strategy towards online education? Or what is Stony Brook University's philosophy towards online education? Or what is our stance towards online education? The response isn't going to be identical, but it should be widely shared and recognizable. There shouldn't be a lot of variance in that in the response. And so I think if somebody would say, how will you know that this process and this shared governance works? I would argue you'll get it roughly right when most people have the same or similar understanding of what we're trying to do in relation to online education. That ultimately is the outcome that we're looking for. And that fundamentally, online students get the support that they need to be successful, and that faculty teaching in online courses receive the same sort of support that they need to be successful in what they're doing. So, Rose, any thoughts to share?
No, I think I'll probably, in the next two slides, we'll kind of get down to what we've, again, like what Peter was saying, starting with the Online Steering Committee, which is ironically, thank you for letting us change the session, because we had an Online Steering Committee meeting at the same time. So thank you. We appreciate you swapping Steve Race and crew. So when we talked about the Online Steering Committee, we wanted to figure out, because we had these two groups, what was the, what really should be covered under both. And again, as we said, it's a little bit of a Venn diagram, but these are the topics that we thought would probably show up under the Online Steering Committee, or probably be discussed. Accreditation, as I mentioned before, it was, Middle States actually had that separate meeting for us, and I was very, very concerned. Obviously, we got found out like right at the last minute. Accessibility, we've all been talking about accessibility, right? That's huge, huge piece that we've been concerned about. We've been trying to, share with the faculty. I know that you've probably seen Kristen Hall. She's done a couple presentations, and when she talks about the online course development program that we've done, we make sure, the instructional designers are focusing on accessibility for those courses, but we want to share with everybody the importance of it across the board. The data piece, we talk about data a lot, enrollment and retention, federal regulations and funding. And as you go through this list, improving student retention and success rates, orientation programs, policies and procedures, quality assurance, resources and information departments need across the campus, and then other resources needed, technology and infrastructure, and student services. As you look at this list, you'll see who we picked to be part of this group really aligns with what some of the topics. So actually, you know what, I'm just gonna this online steering committee members encompass people from all across the university. It's not just it's not just academic, it's not just enrollment. We have academic affairs and CELT, obviously us. Division of Undergraduate Education. We have enrollment management. Today during our meeting, it was really, really helpful to have I think assistant provost for enrollment management there. I always forget his title exactly. And, he was able to provide data on the fly. Graduate council representative and the graduate school itself. We had the dean of the graduate school there. And again, she was able to pull up some data for us. The health sciences, we want to make sure we have two sides of campus. We always say we have the health side and we have the non-health side. We wanted to make sure we had representation from both of those sides of campus. Institutional research, finance, faculty affairs, the Office of Equity and Access, online program council. So what we really wanted to do here was take members of online program council and also have them in the online steering committee. That way, any overlap and any conversation that crossed both, they were able to, it was able to go back and forth. They were able to bring us information from program council. I'm sorry, the sun just got really bad. And then they were also able to bring back stuff from the steering committee to the program council. The registrar, School of Professional Development, student affairs, which has been super, super helpful, right? Because we have all the students, we really have to get more student feedback. And that's something that we have talked about again today, and we've been thinking about for a really long time. We have course evals and we have student feedback on a lot of things, but we don't have specific feedback from faculty or students about online and their experiences. So we have these programs, right? And whatever they're getting, whatever information or data they're collecting, if the whole program is online, it's online, and that's great. But for all of our courses that are online and they're just, one-offs, like, what do people think about that? What do the students think about that? What do the teachers think about? What's missing? What resources do the students need, both in the course level and the program level, and the same for the faculty. And then we also have a representative for undergraduate council in the university libraries. And not everyone is there all the time. We record our sessions, we take notes, we share all the information. And I really think what's helpful about this is all these people are invited, but the people who are really connected to this are the people that come. And I think that's really important for us and also for them as well. Did I miss anything for the online steering committee?
No, I think that's right. And I think your point about the representation is also spot on. I think about the meeting we had prior to this today, and the people that were there are the ones where it's more instrumental, but other people are still participating. And I do think the point you mentioned about the crossover between the online steering committee and the online program council is a really important linking pin to provide some continuity, because inevitably that's the point where those two committees sort of do talk about similar things at times. And it's good to bring those cross currents.
And thank you. Actually, Jamie, you mentioned something in the chat. Thank you. We actually talked about we don't have any students right now. We have student affairs, but we don't have students right at this point. And we did talk about this at the beginning, and we decided to get up and running first. And now we're going to bring students. I think that's an important piece that we have to add to the council, because quite honestly, it is so hard to get students to come to some of these meetings. That's our biggest challenge, is to really find a student that's invested and is able to come. No, we really want, thank you for reminding me, because it's something that was always on our list, and it is something that fell off. So we do have to bring a student into this mix. Whoops, I clicked the wrong place. So our online program council is actually a really good mechanism to bring these people together to talk about quality and course design and all this stuff. Faculty are always interested. We started this group actually right before, I want to say right after COVID. We started a group. Anyone who took our online teaching course was able to, we invited them for a session, and they can come and they can talk about questions and issues and best practices and stuff. And it was really great, like once or twice, and then all of a sudden nobody came anymore, right? There, we had like a little bit of a Zoom, I guess. Everyone got kind of tired, and people started coming to workshops and panel discussions and all this stuff. So the online program council kind of pushes a lot of these people together again, and gives us the opportunity to have these conversations. And we're hoping, I know, Kristen, we want to have other conversations with faculty, but this kind of gives us a little bit of a starting point to have these conversations. We really want to talk about program success, transparency across programs, and learn from each other, right? All these people are doing such amazing things in all of these different programs. We want to bring them together so they can share that information. Course design, quality assurance. I know that, again, Kristen's been working hard we do Oscar reviews for all of our online program development, but we would love to put process into place where faculty can come in and they can get Oscar reviewed. And we've obviously, we talk to Alexander Pickett all the time. Course review, assessment, evaluation. And then the flip side of that, right? Moving out of the academic piece, program marketing, visibility. How do you manage admission enrollment? Resources for faculty, for current and future faculty, and tools. Like, what do the students need? What do the faculty need in order to make sure their course is successful, to make sure their students can be successful in that course? And that's really been critical. And in fact, we had a really wonderful opportunity to purchase some software, interactive software that we're hoping is really helpful for faculty in these online, all across the campus, right? But also in the online courses. So they had other opportunities to engage students, especially with the RSI, really trying to get faculty to explore different ways to engage their students. And of course, especially with AI, we want to try to get more authentic learning in there. And, that's a challenge, period, across the board. Not only here and online.
Rose, I thought about one example that might help with the distinction between the area of focus between the steering committee and program council. So one might be, at the steering committee, there might be a conversation about which we sort of had today, how do we arrive at some optimality between synchronous and asynchronous, even in an entirely asynchronous program? And then it's talking through that. The online program council version of that conversation is much more down in the weeds a little, to the point of graduate program directors sharing, or our colleagues from CELT, or instructional design colleagues, sharing about what are you actually doing in your class to promote student-to-student learning? What does that actually look like? What examples do you have? Or what are you doing to promote better student-faculty interaction? So it's much more of a on the ground sort of focus versus a more broader perspective about what might be going on.
Definitely. And so onto who's on our online program council. We have any academic program director at any program that we have has been invited to this group, instructional designers and assessment specialists, and a representative from the Office of Educational Effectiveness program. All of our programs, they go through, and all of our non-accredited programs have program review. And there's a certain number of departments each year that go through that process. And then also the programs submit their learning objectives for the programs and what they're doing to assess that. So it's been really helpful to have them in that mix as well. Academic Technology Services, because they're in charge of Brightspace and all of the tech pieces. And then of course, marketing enrollment support. And we've had some, I'm not always at that meetings, that's Kristen's meeting. But the one or two that I have been at has really good also conversations around marketing and enrollment and our online website, right? We really do need to kind of think about that and revamp that. And I think it's been helpful again to bring everyone together and to have these larger conversations because everyone is kind of all over the place, and this is helping us bring all of the information together and to really make some strategic decisions across the university.
And a very specific example of that is, and it's something we're still working on. I don't know how this problem exists at your institutions, but one of the consistent pain points that the program directors were telling us is it's very difficult for a prospective student when they land on a program website to figure out what the program costs. We send them to the Central Bursar website, graduate school tuition, and it's just really hard to figure out. And so one of the things we've been working on the last 6 months with our colleagues in enrollment management is developing a widget that will allow that level of information to be more precisely conveyed. And that's just a good example of like solving a real problem that they all felt was a big pebble in their shoe. And if we didn't have this program council, it would still be a problem not being addressed, I suspect.
And Peter, there's a question in the chat that I don't know if you want to address it. Do you do a lot of online non-credit work, or is that a totally different area?
Yeah, so at Stony Brook, we really don't do a lot of online non-credit. If you think, so we don't do open enrollment online non-credit. We have done some things in the past, very few things, online non-credit that might be workforce development oriented, where you've got sort of a corporate or a business client, and it makes sense you have some sort of academic expertise at your institution that you want to leverage, and the best way to do it is non-credit. Our College of Business is really the school that's has had the biggest appetite for this. So whether it be non-credit programs that might lead to the ability to sit for an exam. There's a company called Finch if you're in the bond space, and so getting your Finch certification makes sense. I'm trying to figure out, do we do that? Do we do that just in a non-credit way? Does it get embedded somehow as a co-curricular experience? And so I guess the easiest way to say that is we don't do a lot of stuff in that space. And when we do, it's really niche based.
Thank you. So we officially launched. It took a while, obviously, as all things do, to get up and running. We launched officially in December 2024. That was our first meeting across the board with both groups. These are some of the topics that we have discussed over the past little over a year. We talked a lot about the online readiness process, and actually, it was actually great that it happened at the same time, because the online readiness process, there was some overlap between membership in that and in the online governance structure, but also it gave us a really good list of things to do, right? All the stuff that we need to work on, that's really helping inform some of these discussions that we get into with the two groups. We've shared a lot of data over the past year. I think that's really, really important. And I know that, again, having Peter's got a lot of data, and also the Office of Educational Effectiveness and Institutional Research have brought some data in and shared it with us, which is super helpful. Quality, I think those conversations are just starting to get rolling, but we're hoping that, that gives us the discussions will end up in some mechanism for us to do more quality, have more quality discussions, and have programs that faculty can engage with. Definitions, we actually had a lot of conversation about like where did our definitions come from, and what do they mean, and what is online, and what is hybrid, and what is online synchronous, and what is high flex. So we had to really tease that information out, because even in the literature, right, there's so many different definitions. So I know that Kristen and I talk about this all the time. What we define things, sometimes there's other terms or other information, or people just think different things. And especially after COVID, it didn't help, right? COVID really muddied the waters on a lot of this. So really just clarifying that for everybody. Sharing the ports, and then of course sharing the instructional design support model, which is what Kristen's been working on, has been super, super helpful. I think we have some lessons learned, right? I think it's hard to, it takes a lot of time, right? It takes time to get, to make sure everyone has just logistically the meetings on the schedule and the agenda ahead of time, and to make sure, everyone can make it and that kind of stuff. So that by itself is just a little bit of a lift. But I think the conversation, and we just had our meeting today with the online steering committee, and we had a wonderful brainstorming conversation that I think was super helpful. And we have, I think, right, 2 pages of content to go through and ideas to go through to, hopefully inform some information about, what our strategy is, and some things that we can look further into and really explore.
Well said.
And we wanted to give some time for questions.
Thank you, Rose. And Peter, this is really great. This is such I didn't share my video. I apologize. This is such a critical time for us to be joining all the sides of the houses, right, together to make sure that we're moving our online programs forward in a way that works for all three, like our administration, the faculty, as well as our students, but primarily our students. So this is great. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask of Rose and Peter, or any other thoughts that you might have about the governance structure of your online programmings on your campuses? I know it's late in the day on Friday, and we've all been just blown away by the different topics this week at the summit. I know that I'm fascinated by what you all have done, and I'm so grateful that you came to share what you've done on your campus, and I look forward to seeing how it continues to progress. Lori does have a question here for you. Does Peter lead both committees?
That's a great question. I think I'd use that word lead loosely. I see myself more as a convener, I think, of both committees. I mean, I couldn't do this work without great partners. I mean, Rose and Kristen. So I would say collectively we lead these committees, um, and I think our goal is to get it roughly right. We're trying to move the needle as best we can, and I was reminded of the value of these committees with the snow we recently had. And it often comes up with the campus closure announcements. Well, does that apply to online students? And it's like somebody forgot about that. So having committees in place to establish policies in advance kind of, lowers the noise quotient ahead of time.
That's a great response. Oh, and great. Rose responded to Lori's comment that it sounds like agendas are collective. And Rose says, yes, and we use our OLIR data to inform them. That's great. Do you see any potential iterations of this other than adding some students to your council? Do you see any adjustments that you need to make, or you're still waiting to get a little bit more time under your belts before you do some sort of review?
My sense is that it's pretty comprehensive. It's not as if questions are coming forth that we can't field, if you will. So, I mean, the kinds of questions that I'm anticipating coming up, things like faculty peer review, as an example. Faculty peer review is going to be a conversation at the Online Program Council that really sort of takes hold, and then I suppose we'll pitch those insights over to the Online Steering Committee, and then vice versa. There are going to be things happening at the Online Steering Committee. Perhaps, we as a university, we do not have an online degree completion program at the undergraduate level. And I suspect there's going to be a conversation coming, where that might be something that gets entertained. That will start in the Online Steering Committee and then sort of get pitched over the wall the other way. So at least from my perspective, Rose might think differently, but I feel like most stuff gets pitched over the wall pretty well, or it gets passed through the wall, but there's not much left that we're not able to address with these two committees.
Yeah,
that's great.
I agree. It is comprehensive, and we have been in discussions already with online oh my gosh, OEE. Everyone's got so many online education. Office of Educational Effectiveness, excuse me, to look at evaluating the two committees as well and seeing what the participants think, hopefully before the spring semester is over.
Great. Okay, any more questions before we round out our week here? I want to thank you, Rose and Peter, for sharing what it is you do on your campus and responding to everybody's questions here. I'll get your PowerPoint up in the SUNY Connect space that we have for the summit in Brightspace, and I appreciate you taking the time, and people are starting to extend their thanks to you in the chat as well. I hope to see you all at CIT. I think that's on your campus this year, correct?
Yep.
So I hope to see you all there.
Thank you.